Looks like some people are still joining us here. Quick introduction. So my name is Weston Kieschnick, and I am going to skip all the pretentious introductions. You don't need to hear my bio. There is literally only one thing that you all need to know about me before we continue, and that is this. I love teaching. I love it. Like it's a problem. I love teaching so much. I was a high school teacher for a number of years. I taught online for a number of years. I love teaching so much. I write books on teaching and blogs on teaching. I host a podcast on teaching, and I love teaching so much. I also married a teacher, which means my children are probably going to grow up to be resentful. If you were thinking teachers, that is incorrect. The word you were thinking of or needed to be thinking of is resentful. So any of you out there who are also members of 2 educator households know that that is probably true. So let's talk. Brad, if you wouldn't mind giving me sharing privileges, I will go ahead and share my screen here momentarily, and we will get into it, my friends, because we have so much to talk about today. Give me a quick thumbs up if you see a screen in front of you that says welcome, survive and thrive in remote learning and beyond. Excellent. Let's talk about it. All right, let's talk about what it means to survive and thrive in remote learning and beyond. Many of us have been at this for a while. Our teachers have been at this for a while. And so I want to talk about sort of lessons learned in the space of remote learning and things that we have done and things that we still need to do as we talk about what remote learning is going to look like in the future through the eyes of both a leader, and I want to open up the brains of your teachers for just a moment and allow you to look inside there, right? So let's talk about what remote learning has looked like for us. This is the best way that I can explain it. So here's a quick challenge for everyone in the room. Here's what I'd like you to do. Take a look at your screen, and the first part of the challenge is really, really simple. All you're going to do is take a look at the words. Some of you may have done this before, and you're going to read them out loud as they are printed, as fast as possible. So the first line will sound like yellow, blue, orange, and then go ahead and repeat that with lines 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? You'll discover you can do that really quickly. It's really easy. It's something that's very familiar to you. Now, second part of the challenge. What I love is I love looking at your faces. I love knowing that you're doing it. It's great. Second part of the challenge. Now, take a look back at the first line, and instead of reading the words as they appear, as quickly as possible, I would like you to say the word, I'd like you to say the color that the word is printed in. So instead of reading yellow, blue, orange, you're going to say as fast as possible, green, yellow, red. And you're going to try to go as fast as you can, line 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Try it now. Quicker, quicker, quicker. As fast as you can, without stumbling, no mistakes, right? Desiree, I see you. I see your mouth moving. I see your mouth moving, Desiree. So here's what many of you likely discovered. The second version of that is a lot harder. Nod your head, yes. Second version is a lot harder, yes. And so this is what remote learning has felt like for so many of us as leaders and for so many of our teachers out there, right? It looks it looks and feels like it should be the same. It looks and feels like it should be similar, but it's one of those things where it's like, oh man, this sort of looks like what we've done relative to schooling before. But when we try it, what we discover really quickly is that number one, it's way more difficult than we thought. And number two, there are a lot more opportunities. There's a lot more potential to stumble. Good. If you're not on mute, go ahead and put yourself on mute. Thank you. There's a lot more potential to stumble as we move forward. And this is what our teachers have experienced, right? They jumped into this space. It felt like it was going to be like it was before. And then what they discovered really quickly is no, it was a lot harder and there was a lot more potential to stumble along the way. And those stumbles are okay. That's all part of the learning process. So I will tell you this. This is now, I did a count before we got on. This is now my 63rd webinar that I have offered since we went into the remote learning space. And so I will tell you this, I have met with leaders and teachers and parents from all over the country. And there's a lot of lessons that we've learned in the space of distance and remote learning. And so I want to talk about today sort of the 5 commandments of distance learning. These are the things that are going to help us as we move forward, not just survive, but thrive in the blended learning space. So here is commandment number 1. We learned a lot about boundaries in this space. Okay, commandment number 1 is that boundaries are necessary. They are needed. They are needed for you. They are needed for kids. They are needed for our teachers. And surprise, surprise, our parents need to know where some boundaries live. So Here's the thing that we have to start let me pause. Go back to the beginning of a school year. Think about what every single teacher does in that first week of school. Think about what every teacher does in that first week of school. They establish their rules, their procedures, their norms, and their expectations. It's what every teacher does in that first week of school. And you know what we discovered as we moved into the remote learning space? We moved into the remote learning space, and a lot of teachers just assumed that the norms and procedures and responsibilities that they had for teachers, for kids, for themselves were just going to carry over into the remote learning space. And guess what? They didn't. What they discovered really quickly was that kids didn't necessarily understand what the new norms were in this space. Parents certainly didn't understand what the new norms were in this space. And all of a sudden, it was weird. Like, I had so many conversations with so many teachers who are like, we went into remote learning and now I'm working way harder than I ever did when I was in the classroom with kids. And it was sort of this moment of like, what is going on? And so let's talk about some of the things that happen. Let's talk about some of the why, right? So again, remember those rules and expectations conversations. One of the things that we have to encourage our teachers to do is, as we move into learning next year, and learning next year in all likelihood is going to look like some version of remote or hybrid. It's just going to. And there's a distinct possibility as people start to talk about second waves of pandemic that we could find ourselves back in the remote space. Now, I hope that that's not true. And as leaders, we have to prepare for that to be true. Because I'll tell you what, the country gave us a pass on round one. The country gave us a pass on round one, but I'll tell you what, that hero status will disappear really, really quickly if the next school year comes up and we aren't prepared for whatever comes up. Now, I'm not going to engage in an argument about whether that's fair or not, but it's fact. And we all have to recognize that. So let's start to recognize what we need to do as kids start to come back. Number one, we have to set boundaries. We have to set boundaries for ourselves. We have to make sure that our teachers are setting boundaries, because like Bill said in the keynote, we're staring down the barrel of a lot of teachers potentially looking to leave our profession. All right. So let's just acknowledge that some of them don't want to teach in this space. Somebody asked me the other day, this person was clearly not an educator. They asked me the other day, they were like, hey, how's online teaching? I bet it's awesome. And I was like, oh, I said, so imagine you take all of the things that a teacher loves about teaching, right? The engagement with the kids, the opportunity to see them smile every day, to hear them laugh, to joke with them, to teach them, to see those light bulb moments. Take all of that stuff away and now add more of the stuff they hate. Expectations, emails, and all of a sudden, like, you discover really quickly, like, the reason why a lot of our teachers are sort of waffling back and forth. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to hold on to our good people and encourage them to set boundaries for themselves, give them permission to set those boundaries so that we can hold on to our good people and we don't lose them. Here's commandment number 2. Communication is king. Communication is king. We learned that really, really clearly. One of the things that our teachers have to do, and one of the things that I hope you encourage them to do, is to separate out their communication platforms for kids and parents. Here is a huge mistake. Here is a huge mistake that so many of our teachers made. And I'll tell you, I made this mistake my first year as an online teacher. I said, hey, anyone who needs to communicate with me, email me. And that was a terrible idea. Terrible idea. And so many of our teachers have done that as well. And what happened was, the problem wasn't necessarily just with the parents. We'll talk about them momentarily. The problem was with the kids. So again, when we talk about norms, I'd love to dispel the notion at every turn that kids are digital natives. They are not, right? They're digital natives in the sense that they've grown up with technology, but they're not digital natives in the sense that they know how to use technology in productive work environments. So what happened was, a teacher would send an email out to all of their students, and what would the students do? Bam, hit reply all. They hit reply all, and then all of a sudden somebody else hit reply all and responded to one thing that a student said, and then all of a sudden what teachers woke up to the next day was 6 students having a reply all conversation in their inbox. We have to separate out those modes of communication and make sure that parents have one mode of communication and students have another mode, right? So Desiree says, like, students use the LMS, parents use district email. Absolutely. I'm going to offer up a couple more suggestions here. So Desiree, stick a pin in that. I'm coming right back to that. Here's a quick question. Enter into the chat window. A survey of more than 2,000 American adults asked how many emails a person can reasonably respond to in a given day. And so think about it. What do you think the answer was? A survey of more than 2,000 adults asked how many emails a person can reasonably respond to in a given day. Type into the chat window. What do you think is a reasonable number of emails a person can respond to in a given day? Good. Mike says 20. Andrea says 20. I see 30, 15. Good. Some are saying 85 to 100, 25, 50, 10, 25, 10. Good. Type in the chat window. What do you think? What's a reasonable number of emails a person should be expected to respond to? Here's what they said. Survey of 2,000 American adults said 50 is probably a reasonable number of emails your average adult should be able to respond to in a given day. You know what's really interesting is recently there was some research done on the average number of emails an adult office worker, and just so you know, I looked at another research study and this aligned perfectly lockstep with the number of emails your average teacher is receiving in a given day. How many emails do you believe your average teacher or office worker is receiving over the course of a given day? Good. Notice what you notice from people in the chat. The number is way higher. Your average office worker and teacher receives 121 emails a day. So you all told me, even at the height, at the top of our number, 100 was, I think, the top number you said was a reasonable, and that ranged all the way down to like 10. And your average teacher, consider, is receiving around 121 emails a day. And so we have to get to a place where we encourage our teachers to separate out those platforms. Here are the recommended platforms for parents, right? Parents get email addresses. Parents get your email address. Like that is the medium for our parents. It allows our teachers to prioritize really, really quickly where they, in all likelihood, need to respond back the quickest. So when they open up those emails, they see sort of like those urgent panic emails from parents, and bang, I can get back to those. For our students, we need to be using our LMS or a tool like Padlet, or we need to be using Google Slides. Or if you've got teachers out there who are super active and have professional, keyword professional, Instagram or Twitter accounts, like they can use those platforms. Meet kids where they are on platforms that they are comfortable with and they understand the norms already, and meet parents on platforms where they are. Give parents access to that email. It allows our teachers to immediately prioritize those communications. And we know that communication, especially in the remote learning platform, is king. So number one, make sure our teachers are setting boundaries. We have to. We don't want to lose our really good teachers. Number two, communication is king. For us, we have to understand that as well. I would encourage you as leaders, hey, how do you separate out your forms of communication to prioritize them day after day after day? Here's what else we learned. Mastery matters. We learned that mastery matters and seat time does not. That's a lesson learned in remote learning. And many of us are learning that message and we're having a really, really difficult time with it. And so one of the things that we have to think about as we move into the next school year is that last question. What skills do kids need? It's a conversation you should all be having in your buildings and in your districts right now. You should be doing the hard work of having conversations around like, what are the must-haves? What are the skills our kids need? And we need to look not just horizontally, but we need to look vertically, right? So I'll give you a perfect example. Kids need to understand when we think about English language arts, how do we determine main idea from supporting details? Okay, why is that a skill we should focus on? Because some iteration of that standard, whether you are a Common Core state or not, occurs in every single grade level, starting in kindergarten and moving all the way through grade 12. And so we got to start taking a good hard look at those content standards as a collective group of leaders and saying like, hey, what skills do our children need? We have got to prioritize those. And after we've done the hard work of prioritizing those standards and prioritizing those skills, doing the work that shows up in Larry Ainsworth and Kyra Donovan's work in rigorous curriculum design, then we have to work with our teachers to say like, okay, how do we focus on mastery as opposed to seat time? And so here, I'm going to give you some sort of industry standards in the remote learning space. Yes, I see you there, Matt. Standards-based, standards-based, standards-based. Yes. let me give you some industry standards for the remote learning space. And as you start to move forward with your teachers, this is what we should be starting to focus on. Here's what we know. Learning never or rarely occurs in a culture of negativity, loneliness, or isolation. It just doesn't. Our kids are absolutely needing connectivity with their peers and with their teachers. And so we have to encourage our teachers to shoot for the industry standard, a minimum of 5 office hours per week. Keep in mind, these don't have to be full hours, and there is nothing a teacher has to prep for these office hours. So every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there should be between 30 minutes to an hour where a teacher is just in a room like this. They don't have to have their camera on the whole time, but they're in a room, the volume is turned up, and they're available so that a student knows that, hey, if I'm having a hard time on Monday at noon, I can pop into this room and my teacher will be there and I can ask those questions. Hey, spoiler alert, here's what that also helps with. Oh, the number of emails your average teacher will get. Yes, we want that to be true. Shoot for a minimum of 5 office hours per week, and industry standard, 3 virtual asynchronous learning moments. Virtual asynchronous, keep in mind, virtual asynchronous is that sort of like on-demand learning. That is the Sal Khan version of learning where, hey, I can just dial this up and I've got my teacher and they are explaining content to me. Notice, I gave Sal Khan as an example, but I did not say that your teacher should have 3 Khan Academy videos queued up. Here's some research that I've done with students, and it's really, really interesting. I started to ask kids, like, do you prefer to get your learning from Sal Khan or like some other expert, or would you rather see an asynchronous instructional video from your teacher? And guess what they said? Surprise, surprise, they want to see their teacher. And here's why. When they explain it, it's really, really easy to understand why. Because imagine a kid takes home an assignment and a kid has received instruction virtually and synchronously, which means live, from their teacher. And now when they go home, there's an asynchronous video that comes from Sal Khan. And so what they have to do is they have to connect what they heard from their teacher live to what they heard from Sal Khan asynchronously to the expectations on their assignment. And it creates an extra step in a learning process. What they want is they want to hear from their teacher live. They want to be able to have asynchronous learning support from their teacher that is spoken in the same language, using the same vocabulary, that they can just connect directly to their assignment, right? We don't need to add an extra step in the learning process. 3 virtual asynchronous sessions and 2 virtual synchronous sessions per week. I'm telling you, that is industry standard for remote learning. Also, something to keep in mind. As we start to think about remote learning, keep in mind remote doesn't have to be reclusive. As you start to do observations, virtual walkthroughs of things that are happening in both virtual synchronous and virtual asynchronous learning, I want to encourage you, one of your look-fors as an instructional leader should be sort of like the golden trifecta of remote instruction. We should be asking, when kids are working virtually and synchronously, especially with their teachers, do they have the opportunity to engage with the teacher, with the content, and with one another? If all 3 things are all 3 of those things are happening in the virtual synchronous learning space, you can be relatively assured that things are going pretty well, right? So Desiree asks, is that the same recommendation for all grades? What about early childhood? Desiree, could you, which recommendation? Are you talking about this one back here, the industry standard, 5 office hours, 3 and 2? Because if that's what you are asking about as an industry standard, just type in yes or no if that's what you're asking about or not.
Well, I'm asking about the 5 hours and then the synchronous and not an asynchronous.
Yeah, so keep in mind the number of touch points that we want for kids increases as the grade decreases, obviously, right? Just because the foundational skills that those kids need, especially K through 3, again, this is very, very baseline, especially when we start talking K2 and 3 through 5. Again, I would encourage all of those elementary teachers. And the nice thing is, so many more of our elementary teachers will be more on board for more virtual synchronous touch points because they miss their kiddos. And so again, feel free to let them know, like, this is the baseline. And if they're going to stack anything up anywhere, encourage them to stack more on the virtual synchronous than the virtual asynchronous. It'll be much better received. Great question, Desiree. Thank you. All right. So again, golden trifecta. Make sure kids are engaged with the teacher, with the content, and with their peers. everyone gets real nervous about virtual asynchronous learning, right? They get real nervous about it. There's a reason why Sal Khan has become the go-to. It's because people get real nervous about this right here. They get real nervous about that little hole in the top of their computer and putting their face on the camera. So I'll tell you what, Brene Brown defines vulnerability. If you're not familiar with Brene Brown's work, it's awesome. Go watch Daring Greatly on Netflix. It's incredible. Brene Brown defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And so that's what people feel when they flip on their camera. They get real uncertain about how they're being perceived, right? They feel like it's risky because it's like, oh, there's risk that I'm going to look silly or I'm going to look foolish. And they're emotionally exposed because it's a platform they're not familiar with. We've got to push our teachers past this moment of vulnerability, right? We've got to push them beyond the shame that comes with vulnerability, and we've got to push them to a place where they can design effective video lessons in remote learning spaces. Two essential parts of effective remote learning have to include effective video lessons in terms of like virtual synchronous and virtual asynchronous. You can't do effective remote learning without both of those things. You just can't. Our teachers can't, and they have to understand that. They also need to understand that creating asynchronous learning videos, Sal Khan style, should not take them a ton of time. They can, like, here's a simple pathway. Here are the breadcrumbs for them to do it. They should turn on Zoom, launch Google Slides, PowerPoint, whatever it is, right? And then download Screencastify. I love Screencastify because you can record up to 5-minute videos for free. There is a plugin that you can install in Google Chrome. You literally go to Google Screencastify. It'll ask, install plugin? Yes. And then it will create a little pink arrow right in the top of their toolbar, right in the top of their toolbar. And anytime they want to record anything that's on their screen, boop, they click that button. It will count down 3, 2, 1, boom, and it will record anything on their screen that they want to record. They can then save that, upload it to a YouTube channel, again, which they can create entirely for free. And then they have a running catalog of asynchronous video content, which they are going to need, and they can continue to refer back to. One thing I want you to help our teachers understand too is that everything they are learning right now for remote and hybrid learning is immediately applicable the minute we get back to school with kids, right? This is not an either or scenario. Please help our teachers to understand everything they are learning right now is immediately applicable when they go back with kids. It's not like, oh, I'm going to create all this stuff for remote learning and then it's all going to be garbage when we go back. No, if they are creating asynchronous learning content, every bit of that is usable when we go back for kids. Not to mention, it's going to make their classes better and it's going to alleviate the workload that they have when we do finally go back with kids. Let's talk about student apathy for just a moment. Everyone do me a favor, go to menti.com. Let's talk about student apathy. It's a big, big thing that showed up for us when we moved to remote learning. So go to menti.com, and when you get to menti.com, it's right there on the screen, menti.com, enter code 105890. As you do that, I will go to menti.com as well. You should see it right here. And I'm curious to hear from you. Because as we start to think about remote learning, the student apathy features pretty prominently. And so I want you to make a prediction, please. In your opinion, what are the 3 leading causes of student apathy in the online learning space? Go to menti.com, enter the code 105890, and type in real quick, what are the 3 leading causes of student apathy in the online learning space? Take some time. Type that in now. What are the 3 leading causes of student apathy in the online learning space? Go ahead and type it in. 3 leading causes. You'll notice as you type in your answer and as your peers type in their answers, you'll start to see some additional information pop up. Keep in mind, we're just creating a simple word cloud. As words are typed in more frequently, keep in mind they will appear larger on the screen. Simple question, what are the 3 leading causes of student apathy in the online learning space? And notice what word is already starting to appear in the middle of the screen. It is boredom. Boredom is the #1 leading cause of student apathy in the remote learning space, right? Good. If you're entering into the chat, go ahead and go to menti.com and enter it into, enter code 105890, enter it in so we have your feedback in the word cloud as well. So when we think about why kids get bored, it's because the minute they link with their teachers in platforms like this, the communication is almost entirely one way, right? It's almost entirely one way, and there's no opportunities for them to engage with the teacher, with the content, or with one another. Think about everything that we've done since we've been on in our short time together. Think about the first thing I had you do. Looking at that stupid list of all the colors and the words, right? What's the why behind that? Because I need to establish a foundation of understanding immediately that when you join me during a live experience, you're going to get to do something. You're going to be a participant in this experience. So think about that. Think about the fact that I asked you, like, hey, what do you think is a reasonable number of emails that a person should be able to respond to in a day? It connects directly to your world and allows you to respond and bring you into my world, which is the content that I need to give you, right? Think about this. Think about a simple word cloud right now. Think about sort of like those speed bumps in the road that our teachers need to build in so that our kids are actually doing things. Why? Because we need to combat that thing that shows up right big, huge in the middle of your screen. We need to combat boredom. And I'm so glad that isolation and distractions came up, because guess what we're going to talk about next, right? We're going to talk about isolation and we're going to talk about distractions. As we do, let's consider this, right? Let's revisit. Number one, how do we survive and thrive? We got to set boundaries. We got to encourage our teachers to set boundaries. We have to give them permission to set boundaries because we have to keep our good ones. Number two, communication is king. Separate out those communication platforms. It is a necessity, not a luxury. Number three, mastery matters. Remember, as our teachers are designing things, they need to design these learning experiences according to priority content standards, and they need to make sure that they are aiming that completion time, not at our high flyers, but at our most struggling learners. We don't want our struggling learners to be spending 2 hours per class per day. And you know what? Some of our high flyers are only going to be spending 15, 20, 30 minutes per class per day. We have to be okay with that. Remote learning is a place where we have to be okay with voice and choice and pace and place. It's got to be okay. Voice, choice, pace, place. I saw some of you writing that down. I'll say it again just to make sure you got it, right? Last but not least, let's talk about this one because it showed up on the word cloud. 5 commandments of distance learning. Number 4, parents, guardians, at-home caregivers. These people are the linchpin to making this work. They are the absolute linchpin. Some of you discovered that. Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate you going back on mute. Parents, guardians, and caregivers are the linchpin. Some of our parents in at-home caregivers complain like, oh, this feels like homeschooling. Yeah, it's because you're schooling from home. And it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult. So one of the things, there are very few potentially really great silver linings from this pandemic experience. I'll tell you this. One of the silver linings and one of the things that I hope remote learning restores for us is when you think about what education used to look like 20, 30, 40 years ago, there was always this handshake agreement between educators and parents that said, hey, we're going to have your kids for 6 hours a day and we're going to do A, B, and C. And parents said, you know what, we're going to bring them home and we're going to do D, E, and F. And the D, E, and F was like, hey, we're going to read to our kids and we're going to make sure that our kids learn acceptable behaviors. And there was sort of a handshake agreement there. And what we've discovered is that over the course of the last 20 or 30 years, that handshake agreement got broken and a lot of stuff just got outsourced to school. And so what I'm hoping will happen over the course of our time is that we can restore that handshake agreement between us and parents and at-home caregivers to say, hey, in order for this to work, we are going to continue to do A, B, and C, but we absolutely depend on you to do D, E, or F. Notice I didn't say D, E, and F, like they have to do something. They have to do something. Many of you quickly discovered that if our parents decided that it was okay for our kids to just disappear, that they did. I'll tell you, many of you discovered really quickly, the minute, especially our secondary, our middle and secondary high school kiddos, the minute they discovered that their grades no longer mattered, phantoms, they ghosted. They ghosted on us. And of course they did. Guys, I mean, for many of you, put your high school brain back on. Imagine in March, you discovered that you had an A or B in your class and that none of the work that you did from here on out could possibly lower that grade. Guess what you would have probably done too. And if you don't think you would have done that, that's okay. You were a better student than I was. I will tell you, I might have done that, right? Recognize that some of our kids are doing that and recognize that some of our kids have developed some very, very terrible habituated behaviors during this time that learning is optional. And when they come back next year, that feeds back to that first part again, understanding norms. We have to set norms and expectations that this is no longer optional. This matters. It counts. And in order to do that, we have to tap in to our parents, our caregivers, and our guardians. And we have to remember this equation right here. O minus D equals S. O minus D equals S. What does that mean? Oversight minus distractions equals success. Our parents have to know that oversight minus distractions equals success. Some of our parents have a really simple misunderstanding. Here's what I'd like to do right now. Let me stop sharing for just a moment. Everyone turn on your cameras if you can, please. Turn on your camera if you can. I'm going to do a quick experiment. Remember, oversight minus distractions equals success. Good. Make sure you're on grid view so that you can see as many faces as possible, if you please. Here's a bet. Here's a bet and a challenge for the group. I am willing to bet that within 5 seconds, almost everybody on my screen can produce their cell phone. On your mark, get set, go. 5, 4, 3, 2, I win. Thank you. Good. Let's talk about it. Good. If you'd like to, you're welcome to turn your camera back off. Thank you. That's all I needed from you. Guys, I'm the presenter. I'm the presenter, and my phone is right here. My phone is right here. So let's acknowledge something for a moment. As adults, we have a hard time managing distractions. I'll tell you this, I am not an idiot. I know that the real meeting happening right now is the meeting that's happening right here on all of your phones. I know for a fact that there's a back channel of communication that is going on right now. Ashley, I can see you looking down at your phone right now. I know you're talking to other people on this call or other calls. Like, I know that. That's okay. We have to acknowledge that that exists. We have to acknowledge that kids, when they are learning from home, have distractions everywhere. Let's acknowledge that, and let's partner with our parents to make sure that they are providing oversight. They are the linchpin. If we think that we are going to put kids in front of devices and give them access to all of the knowledge of the human experience, and they are going to tune in 100% to whatever we got going on, we're crazy. We are absolutely fooling ourselves. We have to partner with our parents. Now, good. Melissa, I'm glad you're laughing out loud. That's excellent. Jerry, it is so true. That's why it's funny, right? So we have to acknowledge the reality in which we live, and we have to make sure that we're partnering with our parents. And now here's a really hard truth of remote learning. If our parents choose not to partner with us, and we know some of them have chosen not to, if our parents choose not to partner with us, any of you who have social media accounts saw it. You saw some parents out there who were just like, nope, I'm out. I'm not doing this. And they wore it like a badge of honor. Like, no, I'm out. I'm not doing this. Guys, there's very little we can do. I will tell you, when I was an assistant principal working for an online and hybrid school, my primary job was contacting parents and at-home caregivers whose children were unreachable. And 9 times out of 10, there is very, very little you can do. Even when you're working with truancy officers and truancy courts, there's very, very little that you can do. And so I want to encourage you and encourage our parents. That doesn't mean we stop reaching out to those kids and those families, but we got to throw our energy and our weight behind our parents who are willing to meet us halfway. And remember, we said we're going to do A, B, and C, and our parents who are willing to do D, E, or F. We have to do that. It's a hard truth of the world that we're living in right now. Let's focus our attention on where we can have the greatest impact. Now, here's a really simple thing that we can do with parents and at-home caregivers to help them stay organized. If you would like to give this to your teachers next year so that they have it, it's completely modifiable so that they can modify it for whatever they need. I will tell you, as a parent of 2 children who were doing remote learning, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, it helped every single day to make sure that when my kids woke up, they had a planner. I knew every single day what they were doing for every single subject and every single content area. And every day they had must-dos and they had may-dos. And those must-dos are aimed right at your struggling learners, and your may-dos are aimed at your kids who are going to be completing this work in 15, 20, or 30 minutes. And we have to work with our parents to make sure that they have a plan for the day. And especially our at-home caregivers who are not home with their kids during the day, we have to make sure our kids have as much structure as possible because they're going to need it. Last but not least, here is the 5th and potentially most important commandment of remote learning. Breathe. Encourage your teachers to breathe. okay? It will never be more challenging than it is right now. It just won't be. Encourage your teachers to breathe. Give yourself permission to take a breath. Many of you who were classroom teachers, you remember that moment when you closed the door to your classroom for the very first time as a first-year teacher? You remember that? I will tell you, I remember that moment distinctly. I remember closing the door to a classroom filled with high school students, and I remember thinking, oh my God, like all these parents just left these kids with me. I am not qualified for this in any way. I remember having that exact thought. And I will tell you, many of our teachers feel that way right now in the remote learning space. Even our high flyers, the ones who are just absolutely crushing it in the face-to-face and brick and mortar environments, many of them entered into the remote learning space. And the first thing that they're thinking is like, oh my gosh, like I'm not qualified for this. Like, I don't know how to do this. Like, have as many conversations as you can have with those teachers. Encourage them to breathe and to recognize, hey, you know how many of us want to go back to that first year group of kids and maybe even second and third year group of kids that we ever taught and apologize? Where it's like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Like I was not very good. Guess what? The first and second year group of kids that we have as remote learners, chances are we're going to want to go back to those kids and apologize as well. Let our teachers know it's okay to take a breath and recognize like, hey, you are at step 1 of 1,000 in what it takes to become a super, super proficient remote teacher and learner. Take a breath and walk the path. You don't have to be your absolute best. All you have to be today is a little bit better than you were yesterday. And our parents have to recognize that the schools that we walked out of will not be the same schools that we walk back into when this is all over. They just won't. They'll be better. Our schools won't just be different, they'll be better. Our teachers will be better. Our students will potentially be better. Because remember, guys, I have spent years traveling the country and for the last 10 years talking about the need for integration of technology, blended and hybrid instruction into classrooms. And all it took to make that happen was global pandemic, right? All it took to make that happen was global pandemic. And now here we are. And some of our teachers have discovered like, oh man, I wish I had paid attention in some of those professional developments that I online shopped in. Well, I can't go back in time and help you. All I can do from this point on is encourage you to take a step forward and be a little bit better and to recognize that everything we are learning right now, guys, everything will help us the minute we get back in the classroom. And our teachers have to understand that the arrival of remote learning, the arrival of distance learning does not represent the departure of everything they love about teaching and learning. They can still connect with kids, right? If they are Socratic seminar masters of the universe, there are still ways to do Socratic seminars in virtual synchronous learning environments, right? If they love problem-solving teaching, there are still great ways to do problem-solving teachings in this, still ways to do problem-solving teaching in this environment. If they are the direct instruction master of the universe, guess what? Direct instruction has an effect size of around 6/10. You can bring explicit direct instruction with really creative feedback tools into the classroom and provide engaging learning experiences for kids. The arrival of remote learning does not have to be the departure of everything they know and love about teaching and learning. Please make sure they know that. I will take a breath and offer this for you. Before I open it up to questions, comments, concerns, and/or heart palpitations, I'll pause for just a moment and walk you through what that's going to look like. If you need any additional resources, you can always find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. My book, Bold School, is just a mashup of the words blended and old as a constant reminder that our old school wisdom has to come with us on this path to blended learning. I will tell you, I got super lucky. I wrote 2 of the exact right books at the exact right time. I wrote one, Bold School, on how to do blended and remote learning. And the other one, my new one, Breaking Bold, which is out here in the next couple of weeks, is on how to cultivate relationships and the relationship habits that we need to show up for SEL in future focused classrooms. I don't know why I wrote those 2 books when I did, but I got extremely lucky. So I'll say this, if you need any resources whatsoever, you can also feel free to follow the hashtag BoldSchool, or if you want to reach out, if there's anything I could do to support you, your districts, your kids, your teachers, your parents, feel free to reach out on leadered.com/contact us. If you would like the slides from today's presentations, They will all be at that site. Go to leadered.com/contact us. You can get all the slides and reach out if there's anything that I can do to be of service. I will stop a share right now. I will take a breath and open it up. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, heart palpitations, I'm here. Desiree says, is there a lesson plan template? Things to think about when teachers are creating digital learning lessons. So in Bold School, there are 12 chapters, right? There are 12 chapters, each one aligned to a high yield instructional strategy. In the back of every single one of those chapters, you will find outlines and actual lessons delivered by actual teachers that tap in to digital tools and priority learning outcomes. So whenever I do work with teachers, I encourage them to think differently about instructional design. Here's how your average teacher thinks about instructional design in the digital learning space. They think, what tool am I going to use? And they go from there. And they've got to back up. And we have to be about a methodology that's more intentional. We have to think, what is my rigorous and relevant learning outcome? And that has to be linked to a priority content standard. And then they have to ask themselves, what highly effective instructional strategy will I use so that kids can meet that outcome? Because when you look at John Hattie's work, it is not tools that will move the needle for our children. It is high yield instructional strategies. They have to ask ourselves, what is my learning outcome? What highly effective instructional strategy will I use to meet that outcome? And then which digital tools, how will Kahoot or Flipgrid or how will Seesaw support that instructional strategy, not to replace it, but to make it more efficient and effective than it's ever been before? And then what is my plan for success and where does this live on the rigor relevance framework? And all of that is highlighted in there. It's a lesson design methodology that I encourage all teachers to use in the digital learning space. Excellent question. Yes, Jeremiah, learning outcomes first, because it's the thing that we are held accountable to. The state is not going to hold us accountable to whether or not we designed really cool learning experiences for kids. And my goal for your teachers is not to turn them into the fun teacher. My goal is to turn them into effective teachers. And effective teachers necessitate rigorous and relevant learning outcomes, and they have a repertoire of highly effective instructional strategies. Good. What other questions or comments can I address? I'll give it about another 20, 25 seconds. Thank you to my colleague, Steve Arrowood, who entered into the chat. I am a keynoter and consultant. Feel free to check out more information. Ooh, great question. With my parent hat on for a second, how do we encourage the student who is not looking forward to extended distance learning? I have one of those kids. Ask my 10-year-old son, how'd you like distance learning? Loved it. Loved it. He's that kid who knocked out his work in 2.5, 3 hours and he was done. Dude, loved it. Ask my daughter, who's 8, Charlotte, how'd you like distance learning? And you know what? This is hard for me as like the technology guy, and everyone in my community knows that. And they asked my daughter, Charlotte, how'd you like remote learning? She will not skip a beat. Hated it. I absolutely hated it. And so we're engaged in that conversation at my house. All we're trying to do is love up on our kid, number one, and encourage her to look forward and just let her know, like, hey, it won't always be like this. And we've got to encourage, we try to encourage a lot of mental toughness in our house. Like, everyone wants to talk about things like productive struggle. Everyone wants to talk about the word grit. The word grit is a huge buzzword right now. And so we are trying to tap into a lot of Angela Duckworth's work and encourage our children to have grit during times of trial like this. And we got to encourage our kids to persevere. It's a difficult conversation for me to have with an 8-year-old girl who loves princesses and unicorns, but we're talking about grit and we're going to keep talking about it. It's a great question. Good. Mike says, what would you introduce in PD to your staff coming back in the fall? So yeah, here's how I've been answering that question to all building leaders. Every single building leader needs to make sure that every teacher they have is equipped with a back pocket numeracy strategy and a back pocket literacy strategy that they can immediately deliver in a face-to-face learning environment, and then 2 different literacy and numeracy strategies that they can deliver that are better suited for a virtual learning environment. We have to make sure that that's true. And I'll tell you what, lots of our teachers don't have them. Go ahead. Go ask your teachers right now what reciprocal teaching is. You'll get 50 different answers. Reciprocal teaching has an effect size of 0.74. You're talking about almost 2 years of academic growth over a single year's worth of time. And most teachers will tell you that reciprocal teaching is a strategy where students teach other students. And they would be wrong. That's called peer tutoring. Reciprocal teaching is a literacy strategy that necessitates anytime kids read anything, they predict, they make predictions, they clarify vocabulary, they ask and answer questions, and they provide an objective summary or retell of a text. Like those 4 things have to happen. All of our teachers need to have an awesome literacy and numeracy strategy, because remember, in the name of prioritization, we are now all literacy teachers and we are all math teachers. We have to be. And they have to have great strategies that they can use when they are live, and they have to have great strategies to use when they are synchronous. Because I'll tell you what, if we go to hybrid models and our kids are showing up to classrooms once a week and all they're doing is sitting there listening to us talk, then we've wasted that time. That is a wasted opportunity. We have to make sure that we're authentically engaging kids and engaging kids with us and with each other and with the content when they're with us. That is the PD that I would focus on for staff that's coming back in the fall. And remember, thing I tell instructional leaders all the time, right? If you don't know it, you can't grow it. And so right now, if you can't name, describe with accuracy, and demonstrate a high quality literacy and numeracy strategy that you could do face-to-face and one that you could do online, that's your homework, right? If you don't know it, you can't grow it. Good, Mike, I'm glad that was helpful. Thank you. Awesome. Final questions, comments, or concerns? Good. Question is, won't the flipped classroom model be more impactful for hybrid learning, where the lecture part is recorded to listen and watch while at home, and in-person time is focused on answering questions from the lecture and doing the hands-on work with students? 100%. So that's 100% right. Like that's the stuff that we have to be doing. Anything that's lecture-based, sort of that front part of explicit direct instruction, should be saved for, that's where your asynchronous video instruction comes in. You can provide that in an asynchronous platform, and guess what? You can deliver it and kids can access it on demand. But when kids come in, they need to be engaging with you in the ways that they need to engage with you. And by you, I mean their teachers, right? Yeah, that's Waiwana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, yes, you hit the nail absolutely on the head. Well done.
You said my name perfectly, so you get an A.
Waiwana, I did? Yes. Oh, that makes me happy. That makes me happy. That makes me happy. And it makes me feel better about my misstep with Chabron. Sorry. But I got it right that time. I won't forget. Awesome. Final questions, everybody. If there are none, please allow me to end our time together the same exact way I end the time with every group of either classroom teachers, instructional leaders, or district leaders since I've been able to start doing this work now 12 years ago. Do me a favor. Let me take off my educator hat for just a moment. Don't think of me as the presenter for just a moment. I want to speak to you all from my number one most favorite. It's just coffee, Derek, I promise. I want to speak to you from my number one most favorite position on planet Earth, and that is as a dad. As a parent, I just want to leave you with this. Your jobs, especially in leadership roles, are more thankless and more difficult than they've ever been. And you don't hear it often enough from parents. And I'm sorry, I'll be damned if you spend all this time with me and you don't hear it from at least one parent today, and that is me. On behalf of a parent, hey, thank you guys. Thank you guys sincerely. Thank you guys so much for all you've done, all you have done, all you endeavor to do on behalf of our kids. I will continue to shout it from the rooftops that in the age of global pandemic, it was our teachers, our principals, our superintendents, and everyone in between that made sure our children were fed physically, mentally, and emotionally. Everything that you guys have done for our children, I thank you will never be enough. And so thank you guys so much. I hope this was worthwhile. I hope it was worth your time. I will go get some more coffee and prep to do this all again in the second half of the day. Thank you guys so much. Be well. Thanks for all you're doing. Appreciate you. Thanks, everyone.